Okay, we will return to our study of the book of Daniel this week. Last 2 weeks we got into some other stuff, useful, but we're glad to get back to the book of Daniel this week. And to be honest, we're coming to that part of the book of Daniel which I am most uncomfortable with, which I am least comfortable with, because it's Daniel chapter 11. And this chapter has so many details in it that, to be honest, I can't remember. I have to really go and look at my notes to figure out what means what. Good to see you, Sister Rihanna. I have to go to the notes. It's a historical document, Daniel 11. It gives you details about the kings of Greece, the kings of Persia, and I really wonder if a lot of these details, I would say I don't know how helpful these are. I can't keep them in my mind. So I may not go into great detail in looking at some of these kings. I want to get to the part of the book that really, I believe, applies to us at the end of time. Now, let me explain that Daniel 11 is covering the same information like Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, those chapters. It's covered again in chapters 11 and 12, but it has much more detail. You know that in Daniel 2, the history of the world is given to us through the symbol of this great image. Then in Daniel 7, we have the history of the world through the symbol of the four beasts, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the great and terrible beast. Then in chapter 8, it's given to us through the symbol of the ram and the he-goat and the very great horn. So all of them, they are covering the same period of history. As I said, when we understand this, we are better able to understand what is happening in each chapter. For example, let me show you what I mean. If you go to chapter 2, you know that the image has gold, silver, brass, and iron. Then iron and clay. You see that there are 4 sections, and the last section is divided into 2. The iron plus the iron and clay. So you know that the history of the world, according to the Bible, is divided up into 4 great kingdoms, with the last one being split up. You go to Daniel 7. Now let's say you don't know what the symbols mean in Daniel 7. You see a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a terrible beast with 10 horns. You can just go back to chapter 2, and you can see that chapter 2 tells you Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. So you can assume that in chapter 7, it's the same thing, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then you have Rome with 2 divisions. You have Rome, and then you have Rome divided into parts. So 2 and 7 fit together. Then you come to chapter 8, and what do you see? You don't see 4 parts anymore. Why? Because the first part is missing. But Daniel 8 tells you clearly it begins with Medo Persia. So what is missing? Babylon is missing. So you say, why is Babylon missing? If we are looking at the history of the world, why is Babylon missing? You know something? I could have been looking at a chart to illustrate what I'm trying to say. Let me see if I can find a quick chart. I know it's just something that we're all familiar with, but let me share it anyway. So what I was trying to say is that here is the prophecy of Daniel 2. All right, you had the image with the head of gold, belly and breast and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and the feet of iron in clay. 5 parts. Then you come to, you know that these represent Babylon, the head of gold, Medo-Persia, the breast and arms of silver, Greece, the belly and thighs of brass, Rome, the legs of iron, and divided Rome are the present nations of modern Europe, which is the 5th part. So when you come to chapter 8 and you see the lion, you know it corresponds to Babylon. The bear corresponds to Medo-Persia, the breast and arms of silver. Greece, belly and thighs of brass would correspond to the leopard. Legs of iron, which is Rome, would correspond to the great and terrible beast. And divided Rome would represent the 10 horns and the head of this beast. Everything matches perfectly. Then you go over to Daniel chapter 8, and there is no Babylon. You can look at the picture and see that Babylon is missing. This first part here is missing in Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 begins with Medo-Persia, and in fact, you don't have to guess about it because the angel tells you clearly that the ram that you saw with 2 horns represented the kings of Media and Persia. But so far the prophecies correspond. Why is Babylon missing? Because around about this time we are nearing the end of the Babylonian kingdom. Remember, Babylon was overthrown by Medo-Persia. So at the time when Daniel had this vision, in Daniel chapter 8, the kingdom of Babylon had almost come to the end of its time. So it had no more part to play in the future. And so in Daniel chapter 8, God just eliminated the first part of the vision. That is gone. This is out. So then we start with Medo-Persia. And then so you have the ram, then you have the goat. And so the next power that we expect to see is clearly Rome. The third power is Rome. When you put the prophecies parallel like this, you can't escape it. So what is the next power we see in chapter 8? We see the horn that becomes exceedingly great. And even though it's a horn, and it's not represented as an animal, it's hard to get away from the fact that this represents Rome, because it says that the ram was great, the he-goat became very great, and the horn became exceedingly great. So it shows you a succession of great, greater, greatest. So you can't get away from the fact that this horn definitely, if you put the prophecy in parallel like this, the horn is definitely pointing to the kingdom of Rome. What about divided Rome? Well,
Brother David,
yes, Ian, let me just say quickly. There's no symbol in chapter 8 that represents divided Rome. Instead, what you have is Rome itself. This horn becomes a great horn, and it covers all of this coming down to here. So the one horn represents Rome in its 2 phases. Go ahead, Brother Ian.
yeah, I was just thinking that the he-goat, the horn that became exceedingly great, and the he-goat, it corresponds with the history of how Rome came into power, into being, because it came out of Greece.
Right. Well, I mean, historians will contest that. They will say that Rome didn't come out of Greece. But in a way, I understand what you're saying, because if the Grecian kingdom really ruled the world, then somewhere from within the world, Rome would have to arise. So it would have to arise from somewhere within what was called the space that the Greek kingdom dominated. So I think
But
that's what you're saying.
wasn't historically, isn't it true that when Alexander the Great died, that his general divided up the place, and then out of that came one of them became Rome?
Well, historically, it's not. If you look at Rome as, say, for example, you look at the world today. You could say that England, for example, It's no longer an empire, but once it ruled over India and the Caribbean and Australia, at one point even the United States. But then suppose a power arose from China. You wouldn't say it came from the British Empire.
No, but I could say United States came through the British Empire because the people who came from, who started up the whole American economy, the whole country basically were Europeans and they were primarily from UK.
Yes, so some people will question whether that was true of Rome. They will say that Rome, historians say that Rome came from a completely different part of, um, of Europe. One part that was not definitely dominated by Greece. That's what they say. But anyway, as we look at this chart, what we can see is that there is a clear parallel between all the prophecies. Now, let me say a little bit more about that as well. Why does God give us 4 different histories? We have the image, the 4 wild beasts, the 2 domesticated animals, and then when you come to the 4th prophecy, which we are about to look at now, what we see is that it's a long story. It doesn't use symbols like an image or animals. What it uses is direct history about people. The king, this king came, and then this king came, and then this king, and then this king, and then the king from the north, and then the king from the south, and the king from the north, and the king from the south. It just tells you the same history, but this time it does not use symbols. It tells you directly what happened in each one of these kingdoms. So, we actually have, as I said, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 histories. 4 histories of the world in the book of Daniel. So the point I'm really making is that you can look at one of them and it helps you to understand the other 3. Because if you come upon something and you are thinking, for example, you come upon the goat here. You say, where does the goat fit? You just compare it to the others and you know that the goat comes in at the 3rd level, level number 3. So it helps you to understand what is happening. Now, another question is, why did God give you the same history 4 different times? I know we have explained this already, but let me go back over it and explain why. Sometimes people will say it's because everyone that follows explains a little bit more detail about the prophecies. They say it has to do with more detail. But I'm going to say it's more than that. It's not just that God is giving us more detail, it's that God is giving us a view from a different perspective. Now, let me explain what that means. Different perspective. The first prophecy is talking about the history of the world from the point of view of the physical. I don't know if I should say the physical. Okay, let me not try to write that. The physical or the material or the geographic world. If you look at this first prophecy, what is this image made of? It's made of elements that come from the ground, right? Even though gold is a precious metal, so is silver, brass not so valuable, iron, common and cheap, and dirt at the bottom, the cheapest of all. But all of these are elements from the ground. So I believe the first prophecy is talking about the history of the world from the standpoint of the physical or the material world. So God was showing you that these are the kingdoms that control the world in terms of the geography of the world. But at the end of it, remember that even the kingdom of Christ in this prophecy Even the kingdom of Christ is represented as as a material thing. It's represented as a stone. Everything in this image, everything in this prophecy is made up of materials from the earth. Even the kingdom of Christ is represented as a stone, which is something from the earth, and it destroys the image and becomes a great mountain and fills the whole earth. It's talking about the physical kingdom, the land space, then let me put it that way, the land space. Because every kingdom has a land space. So this is talking about the land space is going to be given to the kingdom of Christ. But in the meantime, the land space was ruled by Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, and the nations of Europe. But the land space is going to be taken over by the kingdom of Jesus. And that's the first part of a kingdom. You're looking at the kingdom of God in the book of Daniel. The first element of a kingdom is the land itself. And that's what Daniel chapter 2 is talking about. So when you come to chapter 7 now, the second one, it's not that God just takes the same prophecy and gives you more details. No. In chapter 2, it's not, in chapter 7, it's not looking at the kingdom as land space. It is looking at the kingdom now as political entities. Let me use the word political. So, what do I mean? These empires are now regarded as beasts or animals, wild beasts, all of them. You know what is interesting is that the first one, the lion, at one point it says that the heart of a man was given to it. It says that the heart of a man was given to the lion. After it became strong, it was given the heart of a man, and it was made to stand upon its feet like a man. You know, I'm just beginning to think something. A little thought is in my head, but let me say it at the end when I finish commenting. So, what God is showing us here is that the political powers of the world are like wild animals. I think that is what God is saying. And when you look at the nature of these kingdoms today and the way they carry on, the political powers, and I can just say freely, you know, I like the people of Europe, and I like the people of America, and I like the people of Canada, but I don't like their governments. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I'll tell you, I don't like their governments, right? Some of these governments are tyrannical, deceptive, wicked. But I like the people. The people are my friends, my brothers, my sisters. I mean, not all of them, but many of them. I find them to be lovely people. But the governments are like wild beasts. And that is how God depicts them, wild animals. God is showing you that they are innately savage and senseless and godless and evil, even evil. Now, interestingly, in this prophecy, the kingdom of Christ is represented. God does not represent Christ as a beast, even though the kingdom of Christ in the first one is represented as a stone, element of the earth. But in this prophecy, the kingdom of Christ is represented as a man, as the Son of Man. While all the kingdoms of the world are represented as wild animals, the kingdom of Jesus is represented as a man. So, the point that I made earlier on about the lion being given a man's heart is just a thought that crosses my mind. Maybe there's nothing to it. But I'm wondering if it is said that a man's heart is given to this lion because the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, actually became a follower of God. I know it wasn't true of Babylon when it was destroyed, but at one point, Babylon, the king of Babylon, the great king of Babylon, came to acknowledge the God of heaven and became a follower of Yahweh. So maybe I'm speculating. Maybe that is why the Bible says that a man's heart was given to the lion. Maybe the nature of Babylon changed a bit. Anyway, it's just a fleeting thought. But so the first one is talking about the physical or the geographic or the earth elements of the kingdoms, while the second one is talking about the political element of the kingdom. Now, every kingdom has a geographic space. Even the Vatican has a little land space of 100 acres. Every kingdom has a land space. Every kingdom has a political system, a government system. That's chapter 7. And what God is showing us is the setting up of the kingdom of Christ. So first of all, we get our land space. Then we get our government. The Son of Man becomes king forever. What else does a kingdom have? Maybe not so obvious today. But the third thing that you will find in a kingdom, especially in biblical times, was the worship system or the religious system. And that is why prophecy number 3 in chapter 8, it has these animals, a ram and a goat. Why? Because these are animals involved in the worship of the sanctuary. So, we are looking at the third prophecy, which is focused on worship, because it says that the little horn will cast down the truth to the ground, and it will throw down the place of the sanctuary of Christ. And then, after a while, the sanctuary is to be restored. The restoration of the sanctuary is the restoration of true worship. So, the third prophecy is focusing on worship. So you have the land space, then you have the government, then you have the worship or the religious system. Then the fourth prophecy.
I have a point there.
Yes, go ahead, Ian.
While you're speaking, it seemed to make sense to me because Media Persia is the one that actually allowed Israel to go back and to rebuild the sanctuary. And see, Greece now came and attack it. So it's making sense.
Right. And there's not a place in chapter 8 where it talks about the setting up of the kingdom of Christ, but it talks about the restoring of true worship. That's the end point of that chapter. Then you come over to chapter 8, to chapter 11, which is where we're about to go now. And chapter 11 is again a repeat of the history, but with a different emphasis. So you have the physical land space, the government or the political system, then the system of worship. All of these things are to be restored to God's people, to God's kingdom. What about the last prophecy? What is the restoration here? Well, you won't find it in chapter 11, but chapter 11 continues into chapter 12. And in chapter 12, it tells you about the restoring of the last element of the kingdom. And that is the restoring of the people. Because in Daniel chapter 12, I think it is verse 4, it says, "At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book." So the theme of the book of Daniel is really the great theme of the restoration of the kingdom of God. But this time, not the kingdom of the Jews. This time the restoration of the great eternal kingdom that will be forever and ever. So all of it is there in the book of Daniel. And the background drama in Daniel is that Daniel did not understand this. And so every time God was telling him about something to be restored, Daniel was bothered about it. Why? Because God was talking about sometimes in the far distant future. And Daniel was thinking about the restoring of the Jews in the next few years. because that is what he understood. He was looking at the restoring of the Jews. Daniel did not know about the great eternal kingdom that was to come in the future, where with all the things we expect. He was looking for the restoration of the kingdom of the Jews. And so it was a dilemma for him. That is why he was sometimes going back to God in prayer and in sackcloth and ashes, and couldn't eat any food. He was troubled because he didn't understand. And you will remember in chapter 10, he said he had a vision and he understood, and the time was long. It looks like at the end he got to understand that, hey, these visions I'm getting, they're talking about something other than what I'm looking for. There's something in the distant future. It has to do with something very great that is to take place. And it's not talking about my time or the Jews. I think he got to understand that at the end, because he says he understood the vision and the time was long. So anyway, this is why you have 4 prophecies in the book of Daniel. They are dealing with 4 different aspects of the great kingdom of Jesus Christ. It's talking about the setting up of the 4 aspects. First of all, the stone representing the geographic kingdom. Then the Son of Man receives his kingdom, representing the king getting his kingdom, the government being established. Then the sanctuary being restored, meaning that the worship system of the kingdom is reestablished. And then finally, the people delivered, meaning that the people of the kingdom will finally be restored to their place. So this is why in the book of Daniel we have 4 different prophecies. So let me pause a little bit. I want to make sure that everybody understands this. Is there any question concerning this that I need to clarify? Anybody? I try to see if I can simplify it as much as possible, but I know that sometimes I don't do a good enough job. So yes, Brother King, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't really need anything clarified except for maybe since we're going in chapter 11 and 12, do you have like an outline, like what verses are for each, like for Persia and for uh, Greece and then for Rome? I mean, kind of like Revelations has a layout, I
You know,
didn't know if you had a like that or not.
I don't, Brother Keep, and it's one of the things I should do first of all. So I promise that next week I will have it. Now, like I said, we're going to look at Daniel 11 in just a moment, but in Daniel 11, it is the most tedious chapter in all the prophecies. Maybe one day we'll understand it more perfectly, and it won't be so tedious. It's almost like reading about the sacrifices in Leviticus. The king of the north, the king of the south, the king of the north. You can't keep up. You don't know who is who, right? Now, if you have a Bible commentary, which I do have, we could actually use the Bible commentary. It tells you, and it gives you an idea of what each one represents, right? First of all, it's the kingdom of Medo-Persia, and it tells you about the Persian kings. Then it comes to the kingdom of Greece, and it tells you about the Grecian kings. Then it moves over to Rome, and it begins to tell you about the kings of Rome and Syria. But the problem is, it doesn't give you a clear line, like how we see in the other prophecies, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Sometimes you are saying, is it talking about Rome, or is it still talking about Greece? So it's a bit of a challenge to find out where does it break and move to the next one. The dividing lines are kind of vague, but we can get a fairly reasonable picture. Now, the last part of this prophecy is really the most challenging part, because the last part of the prophecy is the part that involves us. And I'll give you just off the top of my head what the last part says. It talks about a certain king, one of these kings, who is going to be a great blasphemer, and who will persecute the people of God. And it says he will not worship any God. It says he will not worship any God, this king. But it says, it kind of contradicts itself, because it says he's going to worship, he's going to honor the God of forces. He's going to honor the God of forces. And he will honor a strange God that his fathers did not know. And yet it says he will exalt himself above every God and above all that is worshipped. So that's a fascinating description. And it has led to all kinds of speculation. Some people are convinced that it talks about the Pope. But the thing that is strange is because it says he won't recognize any God. So the Pope, at least, the Pope honors, or at least he claims to honor, the God of heaven. Even though he kind of exalts himself up to equalize himself with God, he acknowledges the God of heaven. And it says of this king that he will honor the God of forces. And you're hard put to think, how does that apply to the Pope? But I have also seen, and I've thought to myself, when it says the God of forces, does it refer to something to do with electronics and modern technology, artificial intelligence, or what? The God of forces? What kind of statement is that, the God of forces? So that is one of the things near the end of the prophecy that is very interesting. Then again it says, here's the other interesting part. At the time of the end, the king of the south is going to push at the king of the north. And the king of the north is going to come against him like a whirlwind. And he's going to destroy the king of the south. And it tells you some of those who will escape. Some countries will escape. And it tells you the countries that will suffer under the hand of this king of the north. And then it says, this king of the north will plant his palace in the glorious holy mountain. But he will come to his end, and there will be nobody to help him. So the question is, who is this king of the north? And who is the king of the south? At first you can follow when you are reading Daniel 11. It means Rome, then it means Syria, then it means Egypt. But down at the time of the end, who is this king of the north and who is the king of the south? Now there are different ideas, and when we actually come to the verses, I'm going to share those ideas. Because you might be able to tell that I don't have a clear idea who this is talking about. I have some suggestions. I know a lot of theories that I've heard from other people, but I myself am not convinced. But I'm going to share these ideas. Because it's put in the Bible for our sake, because God wants us to understand that. He wants us to understand that there's something about to happen, and we can keep our eyes open. And when we see it happening, we can know that we're at the very end of time. Because it says, when the king of the north comes to his end, that is a time when God's people are going to be delivered. When the king of the north comes to his end, then there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. And at that time, God's people will be delivered. So we are interested in the king of the north. And we are interested in who is the king of the south, because it says the king of the south is going to push against the king of the north. It's going to push against the king of the north. And when he pushes the king of the the north will come back against him like a whirlwind and will destroy him. So, just to put things in context, are we talking about a great war in the world, a physical war? Some people are looking at what is happening between, very strangely, the news media is now referring to certain powers in the world as the global north. And they are referring to other powers as the global south. Very interestingly, they say that the global north is like the United States and Europe and Japan, Australia. These countries make up what they call the global north. You can see this phrase coming up in the news a lot. global north and global south. And it's interesting because the countries that are said to be the global north, they are the countries that made up much of what we call Rome. Europe, of course, was where Rome was, and then America represented people who came from ancient Europe. They came across to America. So are the people from Australia, and these nations, and Canada, of course, and these nations tend to cling together. They are the more wealthy nations in the world, and they call themselves the G7. They kind of make up a military pact that they call NATO. While the other nations, usually the poorer countries like the African countries and some South American countries and the little islands, plus India, China, they are many of them belong to what is called the third world. And now they are referring to them as the global south. I don't know why. Because China is not in the south, and Russia is not in the south, and they are two of the major powers in this kind of, what is it? It's a coalition, it's an association. These nations have been bonding themselves together. China, India, South Africa, Russia, Brazil, and many other nations from the Middle East. They have been coming together to form a financial bloc that they are calling BRICS, BRICS. And they have been presenting a great challenge to the established financial order, to what is called the global north, the America European Association. This other side of the world is kind of gathering themselves together to form a bloc to oppose the bloc that is called the global north. So you have the global north and the global south. Why it's interesting to me is the label they have put on it. They have labeled it. I don't think it was people who studied the Bible who came up with these labels. That's why it is interesting.
Very interesting, Brother David, because Australia is not in the north.
Correct. Australia is not in the north, and it's put together. The labels are given by people who are secular. So the thing is, when you look at the book of Daniel, when you're looking at the prophecy, you want to see some continuity. You want to see how it changes from Europe and it expands to take in the other parts of the world. And when you talk about the king of the south, that was Egypt. How does Egypt expand now to take in China, Russia, Brazil? How does this happen? So those are some of the difficulties that need to be worked out before you can say, this is it. But it's just interesting because what we see happening right now, many of us may not be familiar with the political situation in the world right now. But right now, the world is sitting on a knife's edge. The world is sitting on a knife's edge, and something, at the snap of a finger, there can be a third world war. But what is happening is that the financial system of the South is beginning to pose a serious threat to the financial system of the North. Now, I live in the third world. I live in the third world. I'm not in any of these blocks, but I suffer with everybody in the third world. I suffer the consequences of living under the shadow of these political powers. Right now in Jamaica, any Jamaican will tell you, and many people in this room can testify, that one of the hardest things to do is to move money into Jamaica, is to transfer money to Jamaica. The powers that be have put financial constraints upon the poorer countries, that it's very difficult for them to do the things that you take for granted in America, Canada, Europe, the things that you can do without any stress. In Jamaica and in these poorer countries, they have made it very difficult. they will label the country as a financial risk when our financial state is better than many countries in Europe. But because they have the money and they have the power, they put a label on your country, and then your country is blacklisted, that you don't have the freedom to do things that are done in those other countries. It's like the saying that the rich will be richer and the poor will be poorer. And if you are not a Christian, you can begin to resent things like this, which I don't let it bother me, because I know that this is the world and this is the way it is. They have a saying that in Jamaica, they have a saying that the world not level, meaning that the world is not level. They say that the donkey says the world is not level. And I think they say the donkey is always rolling on his back because he's trying to level out the world. So I heard somebody say that the poor donkey that said that must have been born in Jamaica. So anyway, the South, the reason why, I don't want to sound political, but I want us to get the background to what I'm saying. You know that the world has never been level. It's not to do with today. It's the story of the world from the days of Nimrod. It's a story of the world. The more powerful nations, some happen to be more powerful, and when you become powerful, you maintain your power by putting down other nations. Israel itself operated in that way. Maybe if Jamaica were to ever become such a dominant power, it would begin to do the same things. But you know that the wealth, a lot of the wealth that is in the world, in the wealthier nations, is because of how they have abused the poorer nations. For example, England built its wealth upon taking over other countries. It took over India, it colonized China, it colonized the Caribbean, it colonized Australia. England became wealthy because it became an empire, and it took the wealth from these countries and brought them back to the mother country. And England became one of the greatest nations wealth-wise, money-wise, in the past. America has passed through the same kind of system. It became dominant. The American money was made the world reserve currency. It gave America the liberty to print money as it pleases. And it made America the wealthiest country in the world. Now, the BRICS system is challenging that dominance that Europe and America have. They have been in control of the financial system of the world. Russia, China, Brazil, they are setting up another system where they have a financial system that is working independently of this Western system that was established that controls the whole world. They are working out a system. The system that existed was that if you buy anything, one country buys from another country, you have to use US dollars. I don't understand finances. I would say why. But there was a common currency that was understood to be the world reserve currency. So if you wanted to buy anything, you have to buy in American dollars. That's why American dollars are good anywhere in the world. But the BRICS nations are setting up a different system that now you are going to operate outside of American dollars. So now they are trading with one another, and they are not using American dollars anymore. They are buying oil, selling oil, and they are not using American dollars. So this is a threat. This is a threat to the established world system. And if you say that this established system is the king of the north, then it means that the king of the south is pushing against the king of the north. You see, I'm not just talking. I'm trying to see how it could make sense so you can understand it might have some prophetic significance. So the BRICS countries, which is called the Global South by the secular press, if you go on the internet and type in the Global South, it will tell you what it means. And if you type in the Global North, it will tell you what it means. These are not terms that I am forcing because the Bible uses the terms. It's amazing that the world is using the terms. So why it is interesting is because we literally see the Global South pushing against the Global North. They are becoming a threat to the established global system that has been the basis of the wealth of America and the basis of the domination of Europe, that financial system. But the BRICS nations are now breaking that system, so they are becoming a threat to the North. Now, I am a person. Well, I am not going to put that in there. I'm not going to put that in there. But if the prophecy is true, if this has to do with the prophecy, what it will mean is that the global North is going to come back and overthrow the global South. Maybe that is not something many of us would want to see. Many of us probably would want to see these arrogant governments humbled. We would like to see them brought down to their knees. We would like to see balance and equality in the world, because we see it, most people see it as very unbalanced and very unequal. But if the prophecy, if this has to do with the prophecy, and I'm saying if, because as much as it appears to be making sense, it's still if, because we don't see everything fitting into place. But if it is really what the prophecy is talking about, then what we could expect is that the global North, Europe and America, Australia, Canada, even although Canada and the US are not in good graces at the moment, but what we would expect is that that financial system is going to make a comeback and to overthrow the BRICS nations. And after that, then the king of the North, or the America-England alliance, is going to come to an end. And then it is that Jesus will come. So there's a lot of speculation there, as you can tell. But the reason why it interests me so much is because it seems to fit so closely with the prophecy, with the king of the South attacking the king of the North, pushing at him, annoying him, irritating him, provoking him, taking away his power. And interesting to see that the secular press has labeled these two global, what do they call them? Global orbits as the global South and the global North. Interesting. So, having said all of that, you can help. Yes.
If the theory is correct, then who would be the king of the North? Wouldn't it be United States, because it seemed to be the dominant one?
Yes, but obviously the king of the North biblically started with Europe. Now, America, as you say, is the dominant one. But there are some elements to the prophecy that don't appear in Daniel 11. That is why I say some things fit and some things we have to wait. Because when you go to Revelation 11, not 11, Revelation 17, you find two powers, not one. Remember, in Revelation 17 you have the beast and the false prophet.
The 10 nations. You don't
No,
have
the
false
false
prophets
prophet.
in there. What
The
is the
false
false
prophet is
prophet?
the false prophet is not in chapter 17, but he is in existence because he appears in chapter 19.
Right.
When Jesus is coming, the false prophet is there and the beast is there. So if America is a false prophet, then America continues to exist as an independent entity right till the end. America does not become merged into the 10 kings, and it does not become merged into the beast. It remains independent and separate.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Right. So
Because,
that is why it is a challenge, because Daniel 11 does not overlap perfectly with Revelation 17. So to make it fit is where the challenge is. But anyway, all right, that was a broad overview. Rihanna Jr. is streaking. She's enjoying herself.
yeah. But I was thinking, no, brother David, that since if well, like I said, if the theory is right, then and the world is seeing the division of these nations, putting them, because when Daniel, in Daniel's days, the world was not as widespread and connected as it is today, as he's seen it in the vision. And so if the vision is saying that, um, if it's saying that it's categorizing the globe, the entire globe, into two sections, north and south, and there's a king of the south and there's a king of the north. Maybe the king of the south is Russia or China, and the
All
king of
right.
the north might be United States, or I don't know, which other country would you put with the United States that stand up strong? UK? I don't know.
Well,
Germany maybe? I don't know.
yeah. Let me say that it's not something that we can discuss in a forum like this, because otherwise we just sit down and speculate all evening. The thing is that there are so many possibilities that I kind of expose us to the idea. But there are so many challenges and difficulties that it's not going to be some. I mean, we could say, what if, what if, what if, and there are endless what ifs. But it's just going to be, maybe we end up being confused because there are some principles we have to follow when we are trying to understand. For example, let me just say this. In the book of Daniel, there is a reason why Daniel stops focusing on. There is a reason why Daniel stops focusing. Let me do something here. There's a reason why Daniel stops focusing on the nation of Rome and the nation of Egypt. Because we realize at some point he's talking about Syria, and then he's talking about Egypt, and he's talking about Rome at some point. But now we say it expands to take in the whole world. Why do we say this? What is the reason why we say this? And do we have a strong reason for saying it? If we have a strong reason for saying it, then we need to present our strong reason. And so we need to be organized to understand, why do we say it represents all the nations that came out of a European background? Why do we say this? Or why do we say it represents all the nations that came out of Egyptian background? Why would we say Russia and China are a part of the South when they are not even geographically South? What makes them global South? Maybe if we look at why the secular press, why does the secular press refer to them as South when they are not in the South at all? That's an interesting thing. I'm going to look at that. Because there's a reason why they put China in the South and they put Russia in the South, and Russia is more north than America or the European nations. And China likewise. Why do they refer to them as South? Why do they call this group the Global South? So there's a reason. So maybe we can look at all of that and come up with some solid answers that make sense. But for the time being, I mean, what we don't want to do is just throw ideas back and forth, and then most people are left kind of like in limbo. Because some of us would understand what is going on and some wouldn't understand. You see what I'm saying?
What's the traditional explanation? The geographical positions are usually based off of where Israel is, right?
Yes. Now, the traditional explanation is that the Grecian Empire, the Rome, was divided into two basic divisions. First there were four, then it went to two. So the northern part was in Syria, was in Europe, and the southern part was in Egypt. At one point, the traditional idea, which is what we get from Adventism, is that the northern king represented France. I don't know, it became France instead of Europe, and the southern part was Syria. And what was Turkey, not Syria, Turkey.
Turkey.
So they were looking at it as geographically north and south. So they believed that at the time of the end, Turkey would interfere with France, and France would come against Turkey and destroy Turkey. And they believed that that happened sometime 100 years or more ago. I don't remember the exact date. That's the traditional Adventist interpretation.
Norman War, what they call it. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, go ahead, Brother Kip.
Oh, brother, keep going on first. Okay.
Yeah, I just Googled this and I asked the question about forces and economy. So it says, yes, in an economic context, the term forces is commonly used as shorthand for economic forces or market forces.
So you're looking at the context of the God of forces. You will worship the God of forces. That's what you're looking for, Brother Kip.
He's muted.
Well, yeah, I was looking for what she was talking about earlier about forces, and that's what came up.
Okay, and that is interesting because you remember we were talking about the Bible says that this king would arise and he would honor the God of forces. So Brother Kip was saying that in looking it up, he discovered that yes, they do refer to financial situation as forces, financial forces, and the reason why this is so interesting is because all of us are living in a world where definitions are changing. We are being bombarded with new ideas and new concepts that didn't exist 200 years ago. Like, for example, artificial intelligence and the possibility that somebody could be worshiping a God that his fathers did not know. I would that alone would make me kind of discount the idea that we are talking about economic forces because certainly they always knew about economic forces. They always knew about money and the power of money. So I don't think the forces here might be talking about economic forces. So maybe it might more be talking about the power of technology,
Science.
yeah, the power of
Science.
science. Science has escalated to a place today where it truly is worshipped by many people. It truly is worshipped even by nations and by governments. Far, far more than anybody than they would
Right.
worship or acknowledge the true God.
Right, and
Yes.
but the economy is right now based off of AI, you know. It's the biggest part of the economy now.
True. So because so much is happening, um, I think it's you, Natalie. Maybe you could just mute
Yeah.
for a moment.
Yeah.
All right, just mute and then I'll tell you when.
Okay.
Right. The so much is happening, and so much seems to be of biblical significance. That's one of the reasons why we are kind of like in limbo, and we don't know which direction to go, because we need some clearer understanding of what is happening before we can say this is what it means or that is what it means. Some people even believe it has to do with the Muslims invading Europe, the Islamic nations pushing against the Western powers. So there are many ideas out there, but I think probably we have to wait to see how things develop before we can say definitely it is this or that. But it is interesting. Go ahead, Sister Natalie, and then Sister Talia.
Yeah, I look at the term. It's interesting. They identify the two section as the global north and the
Yeah, I hear
global
you
south.
clearly, brother.
You gotta go.
It's not like
I'm
him
saying
away.
it's
He's like him
interesting that
100
they
miles away.
Come
identify.
forward, Brother Arthur. Come forward.
His voice is very soft. So you hear me
And the
clearly?
soft is very low.
Okay, here's what I'm saying. It's interesting they identify the global
Much
north
better, much better.
and the global south as these two entities. I think it might very well have a lot to do with the prophecy that we're looking at. Now, when I look at the term, I Google it, it says here the global north refers to economically developed industrial industrialized nation, not so much a geographic location, so to speak. Now, it says with high standard of living, including the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and sometimes Israel, Singapore, Taiwan, and Russia. Now, we would normally consider Russia to be a part of the North, but some of these, if we look at geographical data points, some of them would probably not appear in the geographical North. So it has to do, to me, with a bonding or coming together of different nations under a different, maybe the economic powers that they have bonding together for a common objective. Now it's interesting also to think about who are the geographical south or the global south. So when I look at what you're actually saying, it's a very interesting these are interesting data points to really think about, because we are seeing an unfolding of situation with the BRICS in contrast to the global order. They are pushing against the long global order that has existed and has ruled and dominated things. So I find this to be very, very interesting as you highlighted it.
All right, Brother Arthur. Let me just show a map here quickly. Sister Jema put a link to a map, and I want to just put it on the screen because it's very interesting. I hope everybody can see it. Now, this map represents the global north and global south. And actually, I was wrong, because what they call the global south is south. And what they call the global north, apart from Australia and New Zealand, it is north, very clearly geographical north. I mean, it's almost like you could draw a line, and everything above is north and everything below is south. So it's not just a political distinction, it's actually almost a global geographic distinction. So that's interesting. All right, let me take Sister Talia. Can't hear you, Sister Talia.
I'm so sorry I couldn't remove the mute, but if you can hear me, someone just let me answer to what Brother Aeon said. If it's related to the questions that I asked, I'm not even adding pioneers or anyone Seventh-day Adventist to anything. I'm strictly thinking and going by Bible truths, because we believe as believers, the Bible is truth, and it's so, and claim that and understand that to be true based on a lot of what I've heard from my brothers sharing. But I want to point out now that I saw a very good and very interesting video, Brother David, that you put out on what these thoughts were. I'm going to go look for it again and watch it again, because it was it was the plausibility of truth to the fact based on biblical and historical understanding. You said it correct. You know, I mean, and in the terms that you was representing all the entities involved, north, south, or whatever, you clearly stated what it right now I only hear speculation from terms that who people who have created AI, who are those people that we should even consider or entertain? It reminds me of David speaking to Goliath. Who is this Philist, whatever his name, whatever his culture or race, but cultural, you know, denominational was. Who is this Philistine or Stein who wants to mock God? This is for me a mockery of God because the Bible is an interpreter of itself. If we read it carefully, prayerfully, I believe, and as it was given to you, Brother David, because I will. And for me, it explained what I studied and heard from other people because I'm very particular of who I listen to. And right, I hate speculation personally. Ugh. But then I'll listen. I'll listen because you know what? I can maybe learn something new. But it hurts my heart because we as a people of God, for such a time as we should know. We should know. But those are just my comments and thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sister Talia. And let me express my thoughts on it. The reason why I've learned that some of the things I believed were wrong was because I was open to thinking in ways different from what I had learned. There are times when something appears. There was a time when There are times when something appears to be absolutely perfect, and the reason why it appears to be absolutely perfect is because you don't know enough. It's because we are ignorant of other facts. Why we think that our pathway is so smooth and perfect, and that is one of the things I learned during my life, that we should be willing to examine other things because it's a kind of arrogance to think that we know everything. I agree with you that when the Bible speaks definitively about something, you don't question it. But we are talking about a prophecy that even in the best of circles, people are asking, what does it mean? If Uriah Smith thought he had it right, Uriah Smith's and the pioneer's opinion has many holes in it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking questions. But I understand their position very well. And there are holes in it. And the reason why I am mentioning some of the different beliefs, some of them speculative, yes, but the reason why is because none of them makes perfect sense. None of them. There's nothing that anybody can present this evening concerning the King of the North and the King of the South that you will find that I'm not able to put holes in all of the theories. So, where there are holes, I'm not going to act like everything is cut and dried. No, 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 no. To me, that is burying my head in the sand. That is pretending something that is not true. So, when you come upon a prophecy like this, the best that I can do is to expose myself to different points of view and to keep on looking to find something that makes perfect sense. That's the best I can do. And I think I know as many of the theories as anybody else. And there's none of them that is without problems. There's none of them that is without problems. So, we could skip the study of Daniel 11, or we could go through with the study of Daniel 11, and then we share the different ideas. And so we have an idea of what we are looking for, even though we don't know definitely. And it might seem not the best solution. I know how it is. I remember I went to, the reason why I started thinking differently is I bought the book, Daniel and the Revelation. At that time I was just earning a small salary. I forget how much it was, might have been $300 for the month in Jamaica here. And I spent $46 and I bought the book, Daniel and the Revelation. And I thought I had found the answer to everything. I lived under that illusion. The shepherd's rods tell me that they understand everything in the Bible, the shepherd's rods. You know who the shepherds rather are? They say they understand everything in the Bible because their prophet Hutef has given them every secret. So that's what they told me. Well, I thought when I got the book Daniel and Revelation that I could understand every prophecy. And one Adventist, one young Adventist preacher came to hold some evangelistic meetings, and he preached something that was different from what is in my book. And after the meeting, I was a young Christian at the time, just born again. After the meeting, I went to him and I said, "What you said is false." So he said, "Why did I say that?" And I took out my book and I showed him what it says in my book that I paid $46 for, my Adventist book that had all the truth in it. And he said, "You think that that book has all the truth?" And I was appalled that an Adventist minister should be questioning the book that I bought for $46. I said, "You mean I paid $46 for this book and it has error in it?" And when he saw how horrified I was, he said, "Well, there's a lot of truth in it. There's a lot of truth in it. But, I mean, it's kind of, those people didn't know everything." And then he took me to the Bible, to the very thing that I was arguing about, and he showed me biblically why it couldn't be what I was reading in my book. And I was stunned. I had no argument. I went home disillusioned. And my attitude changed from that moment forever. That I lost that misconception that the teachings I got were infallible truth. I started to examine the Bible with an open mind. And when it comes to Daniel 11, I will tell everybody freely that I don't understand Daniel 11. When it comes to Daniel 11 and that last part of it, I'm still looking for answers. So this is my rationale for sharing some speculative ideas, because if I had a certain answer, I wouldn't be sharing those speculative ideas. Sister Talia, you say that you have clear understanding because you have you have what you got from whatever sources. That's fine for you. You know,
No. Let me clarify what I said
yes.
if it was misunderstood. I
Okay.
don't have clear understanding. And
Okay.
to say that no one is perfect and will not have clear understanding, I don't believe until we seriously pray for the former and latter rain with God's Spirit working upon our hearts to speak nothing but truth. But then by that time, I'm supposing that those who would be the 144,000 will be undefiled, and so on and so on and so on. I could never be there because I'm here sitting here listening and trying to learn. And
Mhm.
with those others, you just have to know to go back and do your research, your due diligence with detailed research, because I cannot trust AI, because the AI even says it makes mistakes. So why am I trusting in a machine that some knucklehead, forgive me, had put
So
together just to
hold on,
get?
Sister Talia.
Yeah.
Did you understand anybody here to say that we think the AI is telling the truth? I mean, I'm not sure why you're saying this.
Oh no, well, you're reading something, or where did you get the global north, global south from? That
It
was
was
read somewhere.
it's what the news media is referring to
It's the
as north
Yes,
and
United
south.
Nations, Brother
Yeah.
David. It's
yes,
the United Nations that made the decision.
yes, I know. I'm
It's
familiar
not
with
AI.
that.
It didn't come from AI. It's
It's
in
not AI.
Wikipedia, and it's coming from United Nations.
Yeah.
It's coming from United Nations, but AI is being used to predominantly put all that together. Yeah,
No,
I don't
no,
see.
no, no,
No,
no,
the
no, no, no.
sources.
It's
Okay, what is
based
it?
it's based on the political condition of these different countries.
The
So
oligarchs. I know.
right. So for example, Russia is put in a certain category because of its political beliefs and its financial status. Brazil and the countries on this side, they're also categorized that way. It's not something that AI or any machine or anybody artificially puts together. It's based on the beliefs and the policies of each country, why they are categorized as North and South.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Sister Talia. Anyway, okay, all right. There was a little misunderstanding there, but the point I still am making, and we will have to come back to looking at the details of Daniel 11 next week. What I wanted to do this week was to give an overview so we get an idea of what we are going into before we actually begin to look at the details. So that is what I wanted to do, and my conclusion is that we have pretty clear understanding of most of the chapter. But as I said, when you come to the end, the last two things, anywhere you go, there's speculation anywhere, because nobody has any clear understanding. I started out believing what Uriah Smith says in his book. And sometime afterwards, there was a strong movement in Adventism, which made the king of the north the papacy and the king of the south atheism. And they had a very good case where the Pope helped to bring down the Berlin Wall and to help to bring down communism in Eastern Europe. And they said, this shows you that the king of the north overcame the king of the south. And they had a reason for it. They said that normally, when the Bible says north, you have to look at geography. But because we are dealing with a spiritual situation, when it says north now, we have to look at north in terms of ideology and south in terms of ideology. And so they concluded the papacy and the Soviet Union. And that was good for a while. And then after a while, some holes began to appear. And then they said that it could be Islam versus Europe. And that is kind of popular at the moment. And then, of course, right now, we are looking at, can it be the global south versus the global north? And again, as I said, there are arguments why we can't say definitively it is so. But at the same time, there's nothing that I can look at that I can say, this is what it means. All right? If you stick to Uriah Smith's position, Uriah Smith says it had to do with the war between France and Turkey. And I think that was sometime in 18 something. But look at what it says. The king of the south shall push at him. Turkey would push at France. And the king of the north will come against him like a whirlwind. France comes against Turkey and overthrows Turkey. And then it talks about he will plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. I think they said that had to do with the Muslim mosque that is set up in Jerusalem. I think that's what they say. And then they say he will come to his end and none will help him. So they are waiting and looking for, is it Turkey, to come to his end. I don't remember the details because it was a long time ago and I haven't looked at it recently. But the point is that for a long time they were looking for Turkey to be destroyed or to be overthrown, because it says at that time Michael will stand up, and they would teach that when Turkey was overthrown, then the time of trouble would begin. But that was like a couple of hundreds of years ago, and it still has not materialized. That is a fading drumbeat that is fading away, and it doesn't appear to be relevant anymore today. So anyway, that's where I'm probably going to bring it to an end this evening, unless there's anybody else who wants to make a final comment. But next week, I promise, we will actually go to the chapter 11 of Daniel, and I will do my best to do what Brother Ayan or Brother Kip suggested, which is I'm going to make clear sections to show where Greece ends, where Medo-Persia ends, where Greece ends, where Rome begins and ends. If we can do this, then we can probably get a better grasp of what is going on.
Brother David, when you talk about ends, you mean we're talking years perspective of timelines? Like 1798, this happened. And so it'll lead to whatever else had happened so that it can come to harmonize together so we understand a full picture from the events that took place. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, the thing is, the timelines that we have been given in Adventism, they have become more extended because a lot of the prophecies that were set up in Adventism, these interpretations were established in the 19th century, in 18 something. In 1844, when you talked about the falling of the stars, the moon turning to blood and the sun turning to darkness, somebody is unmuted. It was a very dynamic message because there was a dark day in 1780. There was the falling of the stars, the meteorite shower in 1833, and the dark day in 1780. It was just a few years. So when you talked about that marking the time of the end, it was dramatic truth, because it's like 30 years ago. I was just put out of the Adventist church. It was just the other day. So if you were living in 1833 and you could think of the dark days in 1780, it was just present truth. But 1780, 1880, 1980, it's going on 300 years. It no longer has that relevance. When you talk about this being a sign that the coming of Jesus is at hand, when you talk about at that time shall Michael stand up, and we are waiting 300 years, you have to think again. And that's my opinion. I don't think, I think that these signs are given to God's people to tell you that you are living in the last day. You can begin to look up, lift up your head. When the time becomes extended like this, you have to say, my understanding of the prophecy was at fault. I have to re-examine. That's how I understand it, Sister Talia. All right.
David,
Yes.
another perspective to this King of the North, King of the South. I remember Brother Mfande made some suggestion about the that it wasn't a little horn, but it was the winds or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it said that it went towards the east, the west, and the south.
And the pleasant land.
Pleasant land, yeah, and the south. So it would line up that prophecy with the King of the North, because the only direction it didn't say it went towards was the north, which means it was coming from the north. Now, if this king, if that prophecy, if our understanding of that prophecy is pointing us to Rome, then are we to look at Rome from a more global perspective, rather than, I mean, if we were to look at it from the perspective of this global north and global south, would Rome could be considered, because since it's still the leg of iron and clay, it is still the world power that exists from chapter 2 of Daniel, then we will still have to think of all of this King of the North and King of the South. We have to involve the Rome in somewhere along inside there. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it's something worth considering, because Rome, you could say, has expanded into Australia, Canada, and North America, because these countries are composed primarily
Of European people.
of European people. So you could say that genetically, Rome has expanded. You could look at it that way. So again, as I say, it's something to be considered, but not something that, I'll tell you why. Again, I have a reservation, because America, at the end of time, is not regarded as a part of Rome. The only way, and America is the biggest nation that has come out of Europe, America. So if America is not a part of Rome, and it's not, because if you look at the prophecies of Revelation, America is shown as a false prophet, and Rome is the beast. So America is not a part of Rome. So that throws a spanner into that idea. So that's why I'm saying that some of these ideas, they're worth thinking about, but there are objections that need more careful consideration before we can say.
What if the false prophet represented the religious or the spiritual aspect of it, while the beast of Rome and the other beasts and so forth and the 10 kingdoms represent the political aspect of it.
All right, but the
But
false.
if there's a separation between the religious or spiritual aspect of it and the actual political aspect of it, even though the whole thing is still boiling down to a spiritual warfare.
All right, I'll tell you why. Because the false prophet is said to be a beast, and a beast doesn't represent a religious power.
Okay.
Right. So as I said, interesting ideas, but there's always an objection there that makes me draw back from and cautious about it. So it's tempting, but there are still objections that need to be worked out.
Yeah, I remember you and I, we had this discussion about the BRICS countries before, and you pointed out that they were not. Yeah, we had some discussion about this before. And we talk about the countries like South America being part of it, but it's got an interesting thing though, that even though that some of these countries are not necessarily, because even that same map that you just put up, I actually was on that website before you put it up, and they actually say it's a Wikipedia website, and they actually say in there that some of the countries are not exactly in the north, so there's inconsistencies even with the allocations of what is considered north or south, and it's more on the socio-political aspect that they use to grade or to group these countries rather than their actual geographical positions.
What I do believe, this is what I believe very strongly. Truth is not something that you can discover. I really believe that truth has to be revealed. And that is why I don't feel too distressed because we can't understand all of it. Because even in my own experience, there are times when out of the blue a thought comes, and I believe that it comes from God, and it clarifies things. So, I've always said that Daniel 11 is one of those places that I'm praying for understanding about, and one or two things in Revelation as well, because they're not clear to me, but I don't believe you can discover it. We pray about it, right? Why do we pray? Because we want to understand, but as we have emphasized, as we learn, is that God is not short of the ability to make things clear when he wants. When the time comes, look, we are going to understand, and in the meantime, we are going to share what we understand and keep looking for more understanding. But if we don't understand, God didn't put it in the Bible for the trouble to come and take us by surprise. When the time comes, we will understand. We can be certain about that. So let's just continue to
I
keep.
guess we have to maintain the same attitude Daniel had.
Absolutely. Keep an open mind, a humble spirit, and continue to walk with the Lord, and he will let us know at the appropriate time.
Amen.